Supreme Court just did something almost unheard of in modern America, a unanimous 9-0 ruling. Every single justice, conservative and liberal alike, stood together in rejecting a major federal firearm ban policy. Think about that for a second. 9 justices agreeing on one of the most divisive issues in the country. This isn't just another legal update. It's a constitutional earthquake that could completely redefine how the Second Amendment is applied across the nation. Why did the entire court come together on this? What message are they sending to Congress, to the White House, and to millions of gun owners watching closely? Stay with me, because this ruling isn't just about one case. It could mark the beginning of a massive expansion of your constitutional right to keep and bear arms. On June 5, 2025, the United States Supreme Court delivered a crushing blow to an unprecedented legal attack in the case Smith & Wesson Brands Incorporated versus Estados Unidos Mexicanos. In this 9-0 decision, with Justice Elena Kagan writing for the entire court, the justices ruled that the Mexican government's lawsuit against American firearm manufacturers was barred by the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, known as PLCA. The court held that Mexico failed to plausibly allege that gun manufacturers aided and abetted illegal firearms trafficking to Mexican drug cartels. This wasn't a close call. This wasn't a split decision with the usual 5-4 or 6-3 breakdown we've become accustomed to seeing. Every single justice on the Supreme Court agreed that this lawsuit was exactly the kind of frivolous legal attack that Congress enacted PLCA to prevent back in 2005. This case started in 2021 when the Mexican government filed a $10 billion lawsuit in federal court in Boston against Smith & Wesson and other major American firearm manufacturers. Mexico's audacious claim was that these companies were responsible for the violence caused by Mexican drug cartels within Mexico's own borders because guns were being illegally trafficked across the border. But here's what makes this so outrageous. Mexico wanted more than just money. They sought an injunction that would ban modern sporting rifles like the AR-15, limit magazine capacity, and regulate firearm sales in the United States according to Mexico's failed gun control preferences. Think about that for a moment. A foreign government was trying to use our judicial system to impose its own anti-gun agenda on American soil, to trample our national sovereignty, and to usurp the constitutional authority of Congress and the states to make law. The district court in Massachusetts immediately dismissed the case, recognizing it for what it was. But then the First Circuit Court of Appeals shockingly reversed that decision and said Mexico's lawsuit could proceed. The Supreme Court systematically dismantled every one of Mexico's arguments. Justice Kagan explained that federal aiding and abetting law requires that a person deliberately helps another complete a crime, that they participate in the crime as something they wish to bring about and seek by their action to make succeed. The court made it crystal clear that mere knowledge that bad actors might misuse a product doesn't create liability. Mexico claimed manufacturers were selling to so-called rogue dealers, but the court noted Mexico couldn't identify a single specific transaction or name even one of these alleged bad Apple dealers. More importantly, the court pointed out that manufacturers don't even sell directly to dealers, they sell to independent distributors. Mexico also argued manufacturers failed to implement restrictions like bans on bulk sales or sales from homes, but the court rejected this, noting these are perfectly legal activities under federal law and that omissions or inactions don't constitute aiding and abetting, especially in a heavily regulated industry. What's remarkable here is that even the liberal-leaning justices agreed completely, signaling this was about fundamental principles of law and sovereignty that transcend typical political divisions. Registered as a foreign agent of Mexico, tried to spin the decision as leaving the door open for future litigation, but make no mistake, this was a complete defeat. The gun control lobby had pinned enormous hopes on this case as a way to accomplish through litigation what they've been unable to achieve through legislation. On the other side, Second Amendment advocates erupted in celebration. Gun owners of America called it a massive victory for U.S. sovereignty and the Second Amendment, with their senior Vice President Eric Pratt stating that Americans don't answer to globalists or foreign government. The National Shooting Sports Foundation, representing the firearms industry, declared it a resounding victory for the rule of law. Pro-Second Amendment lawmakers praised the decision as a vindication of American sovereignty and constitutional principles, while gun control supporters could only express disappointment that the court didn't allow this novel theory of liability to proceed. For everyday Americans who own firearms, this decision means the legal protections established by PLCAA remain rock solid. Veterans who rely on firearms for personal protection, collectors who appreciate American manufacturing heritage, concealed carriers who exercise their constitutional right to self-defense, all of them can rest easier knowing that the industry that supplies their firearms won't be regulated out of existence through foreign-backed lawsuit. But there's something even more significant buried in this opinion. The court went out of its way to note that the AR-15 is the most popular rifle in the country and that these firearms are widely legal and bought by many ordinary consumers. This might seem like a throwaway line, but it's actually monumental. The Supreme Court, in a unanimous opinion, just acknowledged what gun owners have known all along. The AR-15 is in common use for lawful purposes. Under the court's precedents in District of Columbia v. Heller and New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin, firearms in common use are protected by the Second Amendment. This statement could be the foundation for striking down assault weapons bans across the country. The implications of this decision ripple far beyond just Mexico's failed lawsuit. States that have been hostile to gun rights now face a reinforced legal barrier against pursuing similar litigation strategies. Several states, including California and New York, have attempted to pass laws that would create exceptions to PLCAA or establish their own versions of liability for the firearms industry. This unanimous Supreme Court decision sends an unmistakable message that such efforts will face constitutional scrutiny. Blue state attorneys general who had been watching this case closely, hoping for a Mexico victory that would give them a roadmap for attacking gun manufacturers, now must reckon with the reality that all 9 justices rejected this approach. Meanwhile, red states are already using this decision to bolster their own protections for the firearms industry, with some legislatures considering additional safeguards against nuisance lawsuit. The legal domino effect is just beginning, as lower courts across the country will now have to apply this precedent to pending cases attempting similar theories of liability against manufacturers. The mainstream media's coverage of this case versus how Second Amendment advocates are framing it reveals 2 completely different narratives about what just happened. Major outlets like NPR focused heavily on Mexico's claims about crime guns and cartels, often downplaying the sovereignty issues at stake and treating the gun industry's victory as a setback for public safety. They emphasized Mexico's argument that manufacturers were turning a blind eye to trafficking, while giving less attention to the fundamental legal problems with holding American companies liable for foreign criminals' actions. In contrast, independent voices and gun rights publications highlighted the unprecedented nature of a foreign government trying to impose its failed policies on Americans through our court system. They celebrated not just the victory, but the unanimity of it, pointing out that when justices appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents all agree, it's because the legal question was clear-cut. Social media erupted with gun owners sharing the court's acknowledgement that the AR-15 is America's most popular rifle, recognizing this as ammunition for future battles against assault weapons bans. The contrast in coverage shows how the same court decision can be viewed through completely different lenses depending on one's perspective on the Second Amendment. This 9-0 decision represents something far more significant than just rejecting one lawsuit from one foreign government. It's about reaffirming fundamental principles that protect American constitutional rights from both foreign interference and domestic attempts to circumvent democratic processes. The founders envisioned a system where rights are protected through constitutional structure, not subject to the whims of judicial activism or international pressure. When Congress passed PLCAA in 2005, it was because activists were trying to accomplish through litigation what they couldn't achieve through legislation, filing wave after wave of frivolous lawsuits designed to bankrupt a lawful industry that's essential to exercising a fundamental right. The Supreme Court just sent an unmistakable message that this strategy, whether pursued by American gun control groups or foreign governments, will not succeed. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote separately to emphasize that Mexico's lawsuit was precisely what Congress intended to prevent, an attempt to hijack the courts to achieve policy goals and turn them into common law regulators. This decision strengthens the foundation of the Second Amendment by ensuring that the industry supporting it can operate without fear of being sued out of existence for the criminal acts of third parties. The reverberations from this ruling are only beginning to be felt across the legal landscape. Second Amendment advocates are already preparing new challenges to state-level assault weapons bans, armed with the Supreme Court statement that AR-15s are in common use. Gun rights organizations are signaling they'll be more aggressive in defending manufacturers against similar lawsuits, knowing they have unanimous Supreme Court backing. At the same time, we need to stay alert. The gun control lobby doesn't give up easily. Jonathan Lowy, who orchestrated this Mexico lawsuit, is already suggesting there are other legal strategies to pursue. Some states may attempt to craft narrower theories of liability that they think can slip past PLCAA's protections. The Biden administration's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives continues to pursue aggressive regulatory interpretations that effectively ban certain firearms and accessories without congressional authorization. The fight for Second Amendment rights is far from over. But this decision gives defenders of those rights powerful precedent and, just as importantly, it demonstrates that constitutional principles can still unite justices across the ideological spectrum when the issues are clear enough. The Supreme Court has spoken, and for once, it spoke unanimously. 9 justices, appointed by presidents from both parties, across the full spectrum of judicial philosophy, all agreed that a foreign government cannot use American courts to dismantle American constitutional right. This is more than a win for gun manufacturers. This is more than a victory for the Second Amendment. This is a statement that our sovereignty matters, that our Constitution matters, and that the rights it protects will not be bargained away in courtrooms at the behest of foreign powers or domestic activists who can't win at the ballot box. The court's acknowledgement that the AR-15 is America's most popular rifle may prove to be one of the most consequential sentences in Second Amendment jurisprudence, setting the stage for future challenges that could restore gun rights in states where they've been systematically eroded. But freedom isn't self-executing, and rights don't defend themselves. Share this video so more Americans understand what just happened and why it matters. Subscribe for updates because the battles ahead will be just as important as this victory. And stay alert, stay informed, stay engaged, because the fight for the Second Amendment is only heating up, and the other side is already planning their next move. The question is, will we be ready?